future is here. I see it coming in clear. Any second, I keep you guessing. Wait and see, it's gonna be a game changer. A game changer. It's so exceptional, it's undeniable. Forging ahead and turning them heads. Hey, hey, electricity, the possibilities. Taking new ground and turning around. Yeah,
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this lovely Tuesday afternoon. My name is Blair Nelson. I'm Executive Director of Water Spirit, which is a sponsored ministry of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace. Today, you're all here to hear what happened at the UN Water Conference. In big terms, the UN Water Conference was an opportunity for the world to come together at UN headquarters in New York City from March 22nd to 24th, 2023. Although those 3 days of conference were also surrounded by a number of other events going on in the city and online that all featured water. This conference was held in order to check in about how well the world has done in meeting the goals of Sustainable Development Goal 6, which is on clean water and sanitation. Long story short, Clip Notes version, there's a lot of work yet to do, but we're getting there. One of the nice features of this conference was that we got to take a big delegation of people to go. So in addition to myself and Frank McCann, who are the permanent UN representatives for the Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace, we also got to take along a number of Water Spirit staff members and board members, including Ann Price, our program manager, Rachel Dawn Davis, our public policy and justice organizer, our board chair, Kate Chambers, board member, Sister Mindy McDonald, as well as board members Anne-Marie Reardon and Hugh Corolla. You'll hear from most of these folks on the webinar today, and I know that they're excited to share their stories with you because it's amazing what the world can do when we get together to talk about water. Now, this conference was the first time since the late 1970s that there was a major UN conference with a spotlight on water. This conference was different from other similar conferences in that there was no major treaty or political declaration that was being debated and decided upon over the course of the 3 days. Rather, all commitments that were made during the conference were voluntary. They have a website where people from all over the world were invited to submit their voluntary commitments to protect clean, safe water. So that means that nations, as well as universities, as well as businesses, as well as nonprofit organizations, etc. Anybody could submit their water commitments and then track their progress as they work towards that commitment over time. And it did become clear that water needs more time, attention, and resources at the UN level after these 3 days. Now, we really got the most of that we could out of this amazing opportunity. The Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace sponsored 4 events while we were there. One day before the conference began, we co-sponsored a ceremony at the Bethesda Fountain in Central Park. This water angel ceremony was a beautiful moment when Indigenous leaders and scientists and political leaders and the faith community came together to celebrate water. And we're going to show you a little clip of that ceremony in a little bit. The CSJP also sponsored a faith-based scoping dialogue on water justice, and we were heavily involved in creating and promoting an event together with the NGO Mining Working Group. This event was titled Impacts of Extractives on Water and the Environment, and it's available on Water Spirit's YouTube channel if you'd like to take a look at that panel of amazing women sharing their stories of how their local waters have been impacted by extractive industries, such as mining and others. During that webinar, we called for a human rights-based approach to water management, as well as stronger treaties and other mechanisms at the UN to regulate extractive industries in order to protect water. And we continued our work at the Ocean Conference, during which we called for an end to deep sea mining, or a ban rather, on deep sea mining before it even begins. Those comments from that webinar were synthesized into written comments that the Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace submitted. And then I mentioned 4 events. The 4th event that we sponsored was a screening of The Letter, which is a documentary film framed around Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si. In addition to these 4 events that the sisters co-sponsored, I was also invited to speak on a parallel side event panel where I had the amazing opportunity to connect Water Spirit's grassroots activism with major UN commitments, like how our work to enshrine a green amendment in the New Jersey state constitution reflects the values of the UN level right to a healthy environment. It's great to be able to link the international with the grassroots during this conference. So with that, I am very excited to turn over this webinar to this amazing lineup of friends, colleagues, speakers who are going to give you a little taste of what it was like to be there during this exciting event and some of the specific stories and information that were shared with them while they were there. Now, we've got a little run of show in front of us. I'm going to ask that everybody in turn, when the camera turns over to you, to make sure to take a moment to introduce yourselves as well. Thank you all. Kate, you are up first.
I'm Kate Chambers, and I want to describe the atmosphere of energy, enthusiasm, and commitment that I felt at the water conference. I wanted to give you a little taste of what it was like to be there. On the opening day, after arriving in New York by bus, train, and ferry, we turned the corner to find a very long line of people stretched out in front of the United Nations. The size of the crowd gave an immediate sense that we were stepping into something big and important and significant. This sense was only reinforced when we walked through the main doors of the building. There were so many people there that it was hard to move, and it was noisy. You could feel the energy as people greeted one another, introduced themselves to strangers, asked for directions, and then hurried off to meetings. The crowd was diverse. There were outward differences in age, dress, language spoken, and culture, and these were all visible signs of the internationality of the gathering itself. It was moving to feel part of something broader and wider than my own community, and to feel connected to people from so many different countries that all shared this same concern for water. The individual meeting sessions also reinforced these initial impressions. Each was crowded with participants seated on the floor, standing along the walls, in addition to those people that were in seats. Everyone was interested in and eager to learn new information, and they were serious when they questioned the presenters. Spirited networking among participants and exchanging business cards was frantically done at the end of each session as people rushed off to the next event. There were also a number of visual elements at the conference that added to the atmosphere. As you walked through the main door, there was an immense graphic of the Millennium Development Goals exhibited on a wall just inside the entrance. Many people gravitated there and gathered to read those goals and to pose in front of them for group pictures. And then, speaking of photography, there were large photos illustrating water and people's relationship with water, prominently lining all the gathering spaces and hallways. These were powerful photographs of water, creating green spaces and water producing life, as well as disturbing images of contaminated water and water scarcity. And these were throughout the conference. All these photos invited reflection and also inspired action. And they magnified the important conversations that were occurring throughout the sessions. Being there and attending the water conference at the United Nations certainly helped me catch the energy and passion of the global community working to address this global water crisis. It also increased my appreciation of the United Nations as a forum that unites so many diverse people from all corners of the world to work on common concerns. The next part of what we're going to talk about today is, or show you, is about the inspirational ceremony that Blair referred to earlier. The conference, the water conference, began with an inspirational interfaith ceremony held at the Bethesda Fountain in Central Park, and it celebrated how water is part of a cultural heritage around the world. And it was a beautiful day for this event. And really the focus of the event was the hope that this ceremony would somehow inspire the delegates at the conference to celebrate water as a source of life and to understand the power of water to connect people, enhance justice, and resolve conflict. So I think now we're ready to see a clip from that observance, and I hope the clip includes Blair leading the people in prayer.
Formal and informal at the various levels, including at the grassroots community level. The value of water is not merely economic or technological, it is sacred. Water is life itself. And we are going to help that conference remember that. I'm going to invite you all to join me in sharing blessings for that conference.
May the nations who gather at the UN Water Conference be united in their purpose of ensuring clean, safe water for everyone, human and all other living beings on Mother Earth.
May the water that connects us all and inspires us to create an ambitious water action agenda that opens the floodgates of a new and better world.
May the waters of earth run free and clear.
Un saludo en nombre del corazón del cielo y de la tierra desde mi tierra maya Tzutujil del lago Atitlán. Lago Atitlán significa Atit es abuela, Ya es agua.
So we are here, to talk about how everybody can come together and protect our territories so we can continue being indigenous peoples.
Now I'd like to turn things over to Mindy.
Thank you, Blair and Kate, and the video. It was a beautiful ceremony. And throughout the conference, there were so many different sessions to choose from. It was really difficult. They were all water and drought focused, and they were the sessions focused on a lot of different areas, from political and economic medical and human health, and of course, scientific hydrology and climate cycles. All of it fascinating and crucial. In addition, there were many sessions that featured the perspectives and wisdom of Indigenous peoples, who, in my opinion, and as Blair mentioned at the outset of the video, were the spiritual leaders of the conference. And why I say that is that the Indigenous people that we heard from contributed meaning-based qualities that are generally missing in our research-based learning. One of which is a collective approach with a shared focus on the common good. And another is a relational approach to water as a living being. Some examples of that: one group in Malaysia reported on their community's watershed use protocol. Water labeled green is available for anyone to use at any time. Water labeled yellow is water that can be used by people with special needs. For example, people who are infirm or elderly, pregnant women, infants. And water that is labeled red may only be used for sacred community rituals. And that is a collective and values-based approach to water resource management. One man compared relating to a body of water as a being to relating to a forest. In his tradition, it's customary as you enter a forest to state your intention and then ask the forest for protection. Not in a sense of magic, but in a sense of reverence. And personally, I find that the practice of regularly naming my intention is a pretty demanding spiritual discipline. There's a group in India that has a tradition of leaving untouched the first 50 meters of coastline inland from the water toward the land, in order to give the sea room to play, as they say. In other words, the sea has a right to be the sea, unencumbered. We were reminded that Earth's water connects every living person with every other life that has ever existed on the planet. The unity and the sacredness of the water that we bless ourselves ritually is profound. During one session, which was entitled Nature-Based Solutions for Water and Peace, many of us were moved by a quote by John D. Liu, who works with the UN Ecosystem Restoration Group. It's a long quote, but I'm going to read it all because it's so good. We depend on air, water, soil fertility, and biodiversity, which are the basis of life. And without these things, there is no economy. We cannot create a system that is so divided where we have a few billionaires and trillionaires and then billions of people living in poverty. We have to figure out how human beings can live together, and to understand that not only human beings, but every living thing has its own birthright, and you can't take that birthright away. We have to realize that everything we do is going to determine the quality of life for all life in the future. And we have a deep, sacred responsibility. We have the opportunity now to contribute to the sum of human knowledge to transform human civilization. This is the way to restore the hydrological cycle, to re-regulate the climate, to protect the soils, to ensure full employment, food security, and peace going forward. And just to recap all of that, John Liu calls learning to live sustainably on Earth our spiritual work. And he gives us what I think is a rather astonishing charge. He says, transforming human civilization is our deep, sacred responsibility.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ann Price. I'm the program manager at Water Spirit, and I thank you for allowing me to have this moment to share my experience, because as you've already heard, this was a profound experience. Everything that we went through, from the moment of waiting in line to get our badges, to listening to the ceremonies, to meeting strangers and feeling connected instantly because we had the same goals. It was extraordinary. I personally found myself drawn to a lot of programs that were hosted by African peoples, indigenous peoples, and young people. So as a teacher, of course, I feel very inspired when I hear of young people finding problems and working on solutions. During the program Turning Research into Action, I listened to several young people in high school and university searching for solutions to real problems in their communities. For example, there were 3 young men from Ghana. They were with the United Youth Initiative for Africa, and they spoke about working on cleaning the lagoons in their area. The ocean feeds water into the lagoons, carrying litter inland and trapping it there. So their idea was to build a gobbler, and the idea was taken from Mr. Trash Wheel in Baltimore. Their goals are to clean and protect the water in order to bring, to protect the water and to bring jobs to young locals instead of hiring foreign groups to come in and do cleanups. The United Youth Initiative made it clear that they're annoyed with the phrase children are the future, because it makes it sound like children can't do something now. When youths are in university doing research, they're struggling to get their work published. They need the results to be published so their work can inform policy. And so many problems arise from lack of data and government institutions having no engagement with young people. But these young people are determined to be heard and to make a difference. And some of the moments were really empowering, but some of them were extremely heartbreaking. It's impossible not to be moved when you hear young people sharing stories, such as one I heard during one program where a young woman spoke about young girls being forced to leave school so they can fetch water for their families. They typically walk 3.5 miles to fetch their daily water. But when water is scarce, such as it is right now in the Horn of Africa, because they're experiencing the longest drought in 4 decades, their water resources are dry. So now the girls are walking 6 to 10 miles to fetch water every day. Because the girls have to leave school so young to perform this chore, they have little to no education. They experience depression and shame. They have no money for the basic necessities. 1 out of 5 girls, as young as 12 years old, trade sex for sanitary products. This leads to disease. It leads to pregnancy. Girls need to be taught about menstrual health, but because women do not have the opportunity for higher education, the people in charge are making all the decisions are men. And the people in charge of water, sanitation, and hygiene are men. They don't see the issues women are facing, and they blame the girls for illness and shame them for being unsanitary. Girls and women need to stop being shamed for menstruation. This conference had a campaign, and it called on everyone doing what they can to save global water and to protect us in this sanitation crisis. They used the symbol of the hummingbird to remind us to be the change we want to see in the world. And the symbol's taken from an ancient story from the Quechua people in Peru. So I'm going to tell you the story because, teacher, got to do it. One day, a terrible fire broke out in a forest. A huge woodland was suddenly engulfed by a raging wildfire. Frightened, all of the animals fled their homes and ran out of the forest. As they came to the edge of the stream, they stopped and looked back to watch the fire. They were feeling discouraged and powerless. They were all bemoaned and watching the destruction of their home. Each of them thought there was nothing they could do about the fire except for one little hummingbird. This particular hummingbird decided it would do something. It swooped into the stream, picked up a few drops of water, went into the forest and put them on the fire. Then it went back to the stream and did it again. It kept going back again and again and again. Then one of the animals shouted out, calling to the hummingbird in a mocking voice, "What do you think you're doing?" And the hummingbird, without wasting time or losing a beat, looked back and said, "I'm doing what I can." Thank you.
Thank you for that moving story, Anne, and well, for all of the moving stories that you shared. I've noticed that one of our speakers has just entered the room, so now I'd like to invite Hugh Corolla to unmute and go on camera if you're ready to share.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Blair, and thank you everyone for being here and sharing this time with us. So I'm, if you don't know, I'm Hugh Corolla. I'm the program director at Hackensack Riverkeeper, and I've been a board member of a trustee of Water Spirit for quite a while now. I think it's in the 10+ years at this point in time. And I was so greatly honored when I was offered the opportunity to attend the UN Water Conference, not only to do so as a representative of Water Spirit, but also as someone who makes his living, as Captain Hugh at Hackensack Riverkeeper. It made all wonderful sense to do so. And just as a third point, as an absolutely unrepentant conference junkie, it was like, wow, goodness gracious. It was, as I think I heard Anne say, the opportunity to be with so many people and to hear so many stories from so many directions, from so many, just so much. I was 2 seats away from a woman who says, "I have warrants for my arrest back home in Ecuador because of my work with my people and our rights for water, and how our rights are being taken away by the government there." And a gentleman that I spent some time with, Mbeke Sek. Mbeke is the Han baykeeper in Dakar, Senegal. And the same thing, he said, yeah, I've been in prison twice. Yeah, I've been in prison twice, almost like as a throwaway line. When I think about the things that we have to deal with, that I have to deal with in my everyday line of work, and the things that we, at Water Spirit, the things that we do and try to share and make happen, it really gave me an amazing sense of perspective that I think I needed to receive. And I'm just so thankful for the opportunity to have been there. So I spent my time at the conference at most of the work sessions, at work sessions. I looked for things that kind of fit with, with what I do and what I've been studying over the years, and the things that seem to show an importance to me in particular. And one of the sessions I went to was, it was one of these situations where you sit there and you listen, and the panel just goes around and talks about what they do in their various countries, and how they're working to support the sustainability goals of the UN, particularly the ones in regard to water. And it was very enlightening to hear what's going on in an amazing diverse suite of countries particularly those who are at most at risk of climate change, specifically sea level rise. The people from Vanuatu and Peleliu in the Pacific were heartrending stories of like our country may very well be gone. You know, we are making decisions as to where our people will go. I mean, just, you know, the idea of that. So at this one session, I was winding up, and the moderator says, "So I'm going to let my colleague have the last word, because his last word is always something that is something you will all want to take away." And so he began to talk, and you know, he's been a staffer, either a staff at the UN or with one of the entities, the civil society organizations that works very closely, like the sisters do with the UN. And he was talking about talking about his son. And my son, he's 13 years old, and we're all go, oh, half of us go, oh my God, you know, like, oh, you poor thing, you know, 13-year-old. And he said, yeah, he's a typical 13-year-old boy, you know. But when when he first arrived in our family, he was anything but typical. And he goes to tell us that we adopted him from Ethiopia. And he, you know, without getting into major details, he explains it was a lot of paperwork and a lot of back and forth. And finally, the day came. My wife and I flew to Addis Ababa, and we worked with the organization that was arranging the adoption, and everything was being done and wonderful. We met him, and he's a wonderful, sweet little baby boy, and we we're so happy, wonderful, so just so overjoyed. And you know, the person that from the agency said, if you would like to, and if you have the time, would you like to meet his birth mother? And they went, oh yes, we would. Absolutely. So he said it was a 2-hour ride from Addis Ababa and its beautiful paved roads into the bush, into like to a small village on a very difficult road, but they got there. And when they arrived, you know, it was a lovely scene of an African village. People going about what they do, like they do in any other country in the world. And you know, they were thinking that we're going to see scenes of abject poverty. What's it going to be like? You know, and it was wow. This is a nice place, you know. And so the woman came out and they met her and they hugged, they embraced, and she said, "Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy. I know that my son, your son, now will have a wonderful life. And I got to know you. They told me about you, the both of you. And is there anything you would like to know?" And the gentleman says, the new father says, "I would." And this is a place where the child would have not been ostracized. The mother would not have been ostracized for having this child. They said, well, if you don't mind us asking, the question we want to know is why? I mean, we're looking at the village, we're talking to the people here, and it all seems like such a very life-affirming place. And why? We're honored, but why? And she thought for a moment, and she said, well, yes, you come here today, and the village is happy and thriving, and the fields are growing, and there's no drought. But there will be a drought, and we don't know when there'll be a drought. And whenever there's a drought, choices are made. And it's very possible that my son, now your son, will not be chosen. And that's why. Could have heard a pin drop in that room. I mean, except for the sniffs from some people, probably me as well. But that if I needed anything to give me focus and to place everything in an absolutely crystal clear way as to why we all do what we do, that's the bottom line. So that somewhere, some mother, some father, some family does not have to make that life or death choice. So once again, was honored to be there, and I hope to join another one and meet more wonderful people and learn from more incredible, wonderful people. So thank you again, Blair. Thank you everyone from CSJP. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. That was quite moving. all of you are leading me into this. And it's interesting. We all studied different aspects of this conference, and yet we are all coming together seamlessly. So I'm Rachel Vaughn Davis. I'm the Public Policy and Justice Organizer for Water Spirit. I had the benefit of enjoying, from my experience, the seamless transition between languages across the panel speakers who ranged from everywhere across Mother Earth. Being able to participate in spite of my accessibility issue was tremendous, and I'm so glad to share with all of you a few takeaways from the time. Next slide, please. Several sessions I attended emphasized the importance of working animals, women, and children. Women are the most representative of conservation and nurture. Empowering and investing in women as a call to action for clean, safe water was very clear to me throughout many different panels. Where there are women, children are being cared for by them and in need of clean water and safety. The necessity to culturally revere animals who aid women and children is ever present, and this was emphasized greatly. Let us, for now, imagine petrol and other means of transport going dark. Where would these women and children go? How could they carry water far distances? What might they encounter in a quest for safe water? And you heard some of that before from my colleague Anne. I learned the significance of UN-level advocacy education, and I will share a quote from one of the panelists. If we have a system that does not maintain support for these traditional values, the animal becomes a disposable piece, such as donkey slaughterers and skin collectors. It is not something we can train. It is something which comes through the roots of our culture. And so I have this quote: our hearts beat as one, and our mission is a common one. For the sake of our women, water, working animals, world, and all mankind. We need to go from impossible to unstoppable. Next slide, please. Water is life. That was a specific topic under discussion at the conference. Water is everything. Without water, life cannot rejuvenate, but with water, it can. And that is so powerful. From different perspectives, water can also represent and feel like danger. Slavery via boat vessel remains in the DNA of descendants of human slave trades. African representatives shared that they were carried through water to other countries, and seeing the motherland as a resource to consume, this carried negative energy and power through what they know as water. Being in the UN Water Conference space, holding these expressions and having dialogue about this, the room really concluded that there were bad spirits that are separate from the water. The cultural linkages and the need to be the moral defibrillator in the spaces of governance was also echoed. Many people noted their connection to the US-based Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, which is a network of organizers focusing on interlocking injustices of systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, militarism, and a distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism. Given Water Spirit works with Indigenous and frontline-led campaigns across all of our advocacy campaigns, it was natural to see some familiar faces in the spaces, both virtually and in person. And so a panel regarding women and environmental justice, I must echo a call to keep telling stories of Indigenous life across all levels of engagement. A clarion call was, do not stop the communication flow. And I really wanted to highlight this quote: we must stop thinking with only our pockets. I don't have the words to explain how much pain it feels for people wanting to destroy our land, water, and our home. I call on you to say stop. Stop it. We must demand justice. If we don't put our grain of sand and fight against these mining and logging companies destroying our homes, we must continue using our voices. That was from Aurora Conley from the Bad River Ojibwe tribe. And it was a very, very emotional panel. Next slide, please. So something I took from across the conference, including this moving Tearfield panel, is that Indigenous are the only the people who have the only proven track record of healthy hold of land and keeping that land healthy, and ever echoing this as we do in public comments at every single level of government. Researchers, developers, policymakers need to hear Indigenous people have proven they know what they're doing. And a couple of other tokens I will share with you that was shared with me was that we should show love to water, that this is a way to love ourselves, and loving ourselves will help us love our neighbors. So it's all connected. We must have harmony with Mother Earth, and building movements increases your voice, and your voice matters. And may we, all of us, use our voices. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Frank McCann. I'm an associate of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace. I serve as their Peace Through Justice facilitator, a representative to the UN, and lead the environmental response to Laudato Si Action platform. As Blair mentioned at the beginning, this conference was different in that the outcome would be determined not by some treaty or a formal statement, but by individual commitments made by nations, regions, corporations, non-governmental organizations, and even by individuals. It had been almost 50 years since there was a previous conference on water. And so one of the first outcomes, which is what I'm supposed to talk to you about, one of the first outcomes was that gathering 10,000 participants was very important as an outcome. There's a hope that the energy demonstrated and raised at the water conference will contribute to the high-level political forum that's held later this summer at the UN, and then the success of the SDG summit, particularly for SDG 6 on water and sanitation, which will be held in September of this year. We're halfway through the period for the agenda for 2030. And we're not doing as well as hoped, obviously, on many of those agenda items that were set forth. So we're hoping that, especially in terms of water, the conference will help us to pick up the slack. The Water Action Agenda captured over 700 of these commitments. So, for example, the US announced a commitment of up to $49 billion in investments to support climate resilient water and sanitation infrastructure and services. I didn't see any details on what that means, but promise of $49 billion is a significant amount of money. Vietnam pledged to develop policies for major river basins management by 2025, only 2 years away, and to ensure all households would have clean access to clean running water by 2030. By 2030, the EU aims to support the access of 70 million individuals to improved drinking water source and/or sanitation facility. The EU will also support member states with 20 million euros funding to accelerate the deployment of wastewater surveillance for COVID-19. Our own congregation made a donation of $250,000 invested in a program to provide clean water and efficient cook stoves for women in Ethiopia. As Anne mentioned, they spend a lot of their time chasing down water, which then has to be boiled before it can be used for cooking or drinking. By helping them with clean water, it saves the women hours, and the girls as well, hours of work and free time to either go to school or become entrepreneurs, both while reducing the carbon produced by the need for longer burning fires and trees and other wood sources they consume. So these efficient wood stoves will actually create carbon credits for these communities. The Freshwater Challenge is another critical commitment made as a follow-up to the Biodiversity Summit held in December in Montreal. The UN Environmental Program and the Food and Agriculture Organization have committed to restore 300,000 kilometers of rivers. That's enough to circle the globe 7 times, and to restore acres of wetlands equivalent to the size of India. We've lost a third of our wetlands in the last 50 years. This effort is championed by diverse governments of Colombia, the DRC, Ecuador, Gabon, Mexico, and Zambia. According to the Secretary General, the commitments at this conference will propel humanity towards the water secure future every person on the planet needs. But promises are promises. We pray that the commitments be honored and that we see success in their endeavors. And I think from our perspective, we must remember that the best and most enduring outcomes often derive from hearts that are touched and changed. You've been hearing a lot of that from the other speakers here. We have a part to play in sharing, as we do now, how we were moved and why that was important. We can continue to learn and participate and model better behavior for our associates and friends. And we gather and we lobby for better global and national policy. Personally, I have to say that the most moving part of the conference for me was a forum during which Indigenous leaders from many continents approached the microphone to speak their truths to UN power people on the dais. Regardless of geography, I heard Indigenous leaders explain that they knew how to care for water and manage it. They'd been doing it for centuries. They had the know-how and the skill and would be happy to share it. They should be allowed to influence policy, especially when it impacts their lives and their environments. Yet they consistently lamented that they do not have a voice, even in their own nations. The saddest voices simply asked that their young, who acted to protect their ecosystems, not be killed any longer for opposing destruction of their life systems for profit and greed. Thank you. Blair, to you.
Thank you very much, Frank. Thank you to all of our speakers. You can really hear the kinds of stories that were moving us throughout the conference. It can be challenging to be a civil society organization within the UN. There's often lip service paid to the voices that come from the grassroots level, but when it comes to the actual negotiations, largely you find the nations talking to business interests and sometimes calling on scientists to get them better data. But really what we see here from our speakers' testimony today is that what moves us are the stories that are perspective shifting, are the ones that remind us that the kind of business as usual thinking that got us into this mess is not what's going to get us out of it. And that water is not an abstract, inert resource to be protected in the abstract. It is specific, it is particular, it is in the bodies of all of these specific people and life forms and places and communities. We had a chance to open our hearts to increasing compassion for all of these water bodies and all of this embodied water, all of these people and places and communities throughout the world. And it was true, it is truly a blessing to carry that expanded heart of compassion through the work that we get to do in the day-to-day. Well, at this time, it's 2:20, and we wanted to make sure to leave a little bit of time at the end of this webinar to open the floor to all of you who stuck with us so far. If you have any questions that you would like to ask, or if you have any comments that you would like to make on anything that you heard, you are warmly invited to unmute your microphones and to share at this time.
Blair, in terms of the causes that you heard, like what can, now that CSJP is like ramping up its efforts in charitable giving and impact investing, what are those solutions that we might be able to support so that we all get closer, you know, to this goal of protecting for life that is within the water or so close to the water?
Great question, Melody. And I'm going to make sure that everybody knows that they're all invited to jump in on this question as well. It doesn't have to be just for me. But water pollution and water access continue to be the two largest issues. And then I throw in climate change as well. Climate change is a water issue, and any action taken to avert climate change is inherently an action that also protects water. I want to applaud the sisters for the investments that they're already making in increasing access to these wells in Ethiopia. That is a massive commitment, amazing undertaking, and we're in awe of these sisters who sponsor us. That's a fantastic thing that you're doing. And then when it comes to what's polluting waters right now, you know, it's largely unregulated extractive industries and plastics. Anything that reduces those or that helps transition us away from harmful extractive industries is a strong move that protects water. I see some colleagues unmuting. I'm going to let them jump in now.
One of the things that I heard mentioned over and over was green infrastructure. We need to stop using fossil fuels. Some countries are saying immediately we need to stop using fossil fuels. We need to start investing more of the money that would have been invested in fossil fuels into the green infrastructure. We should have been doing this a long time ago. We have to do it now. And I thank those of you. I know some of the ministries were talking about getting charging stations, and that's a great thing.
We're we're doing the Laudato Si goal and entering it through the elimination of plastics and trying to get the point across that for ourselves, first of all, that recycling isn't the answer. It's exactly what you were saying. We have to keep the plastic is fossil fuel made. And so we have to keep the fossil fuel in the ground. So for us to keep on, for the government or the administration to keep on allowing the permits to dig more, to prepare the huge land plots that they need to drill more is ridiculous. From what I heard, you can't even use the oil for another almost 10 years. And by that time, I mean, will we have a planet to use, really? So our fight really is keep the fossil fuel in the ground and be hard-nosed with the fossil fuel industry. No, if you want to make money, then join the process of saving the earth. Put all your energy into sustainable energy. I don't know how, you know, what's the critical mass to get this to happen?
Well spoken, Diane. And when we're talking about avoiding plastics as well, to remember that the onus should not be on the individual consumer exclusively. There are a number of times, yeah, there are a number of times when our choices are constrained by what's available. But when we use our collective voices, we can push companies and governments to change their ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Beyond Plastics, we've connected with that group called Beyond Plastics in Philly. And the whole, I think the national group is working from a systemic perspective, so that when you throw your hat in the ring with a Beyond Plastic group, you're always working to change the system. Doesn't mean you don't, do other things personally. So you change your own lifestyle, because that makes us conscious of it. But it's all systemic. I mean, it's a major push for systemic change.
I'm going to beg our colleague Rachel Dawn Davis to jump in a teeny tiny bit, because we have some things on one of the Water Spirit pages that you
Well,
should
yeah,
hear.
I was gonna jump in a bit, sort of like double dutch, but here we go. Yeah, I appreciate that. And Diane, you actually spoke the hashtag that was created by Indigenous youth, which is hashtag keep it in the ground. And that's been for over 12 years now. So yeah, you hit the nail on the head, right? Green infrastructure, actually going for systematic change. And then of course, as the sisters know, go to the top, make sure that we cut the contamination at the source, which is funding these horrible extractive industries in the first place. And then obviously concurrently look to areas where we can put green infrastructure. And as I've shared before in webinars and just in talking, I feel that that's where I feel most in touch with a greater spirit, is actually creating mechanisms for stormwater runoff to be diverted and actually to repopulate, create beautiful spaces, create community, and then obviously make a succession plan so that we have, something that was also promoted throughout the entire conference. And again, just working with Indigenous people all these years in an advocacy role. So we have to think at least 7 generations ahead, if not 9. So that's something that's existed again, way long before our this technology that we have that we're using. But I'm glad to see, again, my colleagues saw this as well. So as much as we were all in different spaces and getting different perspectives from different voices, the themes were very clear that the systems absolutely need to be changed. We can do it when we work together, and we can shift the power dynamic in various ways, again, financially and through litigation and legislation and agitation.
Can I say something? I didn't register, but Frank brought our attention to the fact that big companies who are moving into smaller countries for businesses are also buying their water rights. And PBS had something recently on the farms in California, the big, they didn't say who, but Wall Street type companies buying the farms simply to own the water rights. And I'm sure you're all aware of that, but it looks like the big companies have speculatives further than what we are. Is there some way of capturing that from happening?
I think Coke has been one of those water consumers. And the investment, ICCR has been on their case, and all the members of ICCR have been on their case for a very, very long time. I personally, I'm sorry, but I don't remember where, how Coke has responded. I think they have responded in a limited way, but I don't know. I don't really know the details. But I'm sure there are other companies that are, buying the rights.
Isn't it weird to think that we can buy the right to water at all and keep it from somebody else?
Seattle.
Right. Shows you the way that the whole system is cracked. Now, water rights in the West, I know, are their own entangled, complicated beast. And so for a specific answer to, like, what do we do about Coca-Cola or companies that are buying up water rights? In that case, I know that I would have to defer to colleagues who are specifically working on those campaigns in the West. But the fact that people can join together to put pressure on governments, and don't forget, stockholders can come together to put pressure from within, they're both important tools when we're talking about how companies invest their money and when they invest them in ways that we consider unethical.
One of the complaints of indigenous leaders is that when they often heard the word infrastructure, that brought to mind the fact that their water was being sold or auctioned off by the IMF to build infrastructure, at which point they then had to pay for water, which wasn't always as pure and clean as it had been before. So, agencies that are even part of the UN, like the IMF, are part of the problem. As was just mentioned by Blair, water should not be a commodity. It's a sacred gift to all of creation. And when we start to treat it like a commodity, we're ignoring its sacred qualities.
Well said, Frank. And that's part of the blessing of being with a faith-based organization that can make that kind of moral call, to remember that we're not talking about an inert resource. We're talking about the sacred element of water with which we need to reestablish right relations. Folks, on that note, I would love to continue talking about water with each and every one of you some more. I want to thank you all for listening in, for spending this past hour with us. I want to thank all of our speakers once again for everything you shared on this webinar and for sharing this amazing conference experience together. What a blessing to be able to go through this with you all. As a reminder, we did record this webinar, so it will be up on our YouTube channel just as soon as we can get it there, and we'll be sure to get you the link using the email that you used to register for today's Zoom. If you have any follow-up questions that you didn't get answered today, you can feel free to email them to us at water@waterspirit.org, which I'll ask one of my colleagues to pop in the chat. And thank you in advance. And if you'd like to learn more about Water Spirit at the UN or the CSJP at the UN, you can go through our respective websites, csjp.org or waterspirit.org, and find our UN pages there. Thank you everyone for listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day.